Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to give a overview of the underlying theory of attitudinal psyche and compare it and contrast, most importantly, to Jungian typology and Enneagram. Now, I know socionics does have some basis in Jungian typology, and I have a lot of people that follow me who absolutely love socionics, but I want to do it justice and give it its own video in the future. So I won't be going over socionics today. We're going to save that for a little bit more of a treat because I think there's a lot there that has its own value separate from today's video. So let's dive in. The basis of attitudinal psyche is really about your attitude. And we kind of borrow this term from sociology or social psychology and the way that they define attitude. So let's look at that. An attitude is an evolution of an attitude object ranging from an extremely negative to extremely positive. Most contemporary perspectives on attitudes permit that people can also be conflicted or ambivalent towards an object by simultaneously holding both positive and negative attitudes towards the same object. So right away you see that it's kind of complex. You have positive, negative, you can be ambivalent, you can hold multiple attitudes towards an object. And what separates attitudinal psyche from this conventional social psychology definition is AP, and by the way, I'm going to refer to it as AP because I don't want to say attitudinal psyche every 5 seconds. So AP really looks at a general broad picture of attitude, and it splits reality into 4 pieces and parts. So you've all seen the letters, the V, the L, the F, the E. What these do is they're a placeholder for 4 realms of reality, and we will get further into that as we go. So let's continue. This has led to some discussion of whether the individual can hold multiple attitudes toward the same object. An attitude, and this is the most important part here, can be a positive or negative evaluation of people, objects, events, activities, and ideas. So this is paramount to attitudinal psyche. When we split reality into 4 pieces and parts, a lot of objects, events, etc. comes with it. So volition is not just your willpower. Volition is your responsibilities, your obligations, your intuitions about what you can accomplish. It's a broad stroke that covers a huge section of reality. We have to remember that. So carrying on, it could be concrete, abstract, or just about anything in your environment. But there is a debate about precise definitions. Eagley and Shaken, for example, define an attitude as a psychological tendency that is expressed by evaluating a particular entity with some degree of favor or disfavor. And that's exactly how we define it in attitudinal psyche. You have either a positive or a negative attitude, and that defines your type completely. So you can already see how this is very different from Myers-Briggs and also Enneagram. Though it is sometimes common to define an attitude as affect towards an object, discrete emotions or overall arousal, it is generally understood as an evaluative structure used to form attitude object. Attitude may influence the attention to attitude objects, the use of categories for encoding information, and the interpretation, judgment, and recall of attitude-relevant information. These influences tend to be more powerful for strong attitudes, which are accessible and based on elaborative supportive knowledge structure. The durability and impactfulness of influence depend upon the strength formed from consistency of heuristics. Attitudes can guide encoding information, attention, behaviors, even if the individual is pursuing unrelated goals. So that's a lot to take in, but I'm going to break that down for everybody. We have 4 main aspects of reality. We've got volition, logic, physics, and I know I use F for physics because I wanted it to be phonetically accurate. Coincidence being phonetics is also PH, but we can also think of the F to represent foundation for those of you who it confuses or makes angry. Then we have emotions as the 4th. So attitudinal psyche breaks down the positive and negative attitudes we associate with each. Now, this immediately becomes complex because when most humans develop, we instantly see that there are two attitudes that are positive and two that are negative. Now, I've studied thousands and thousands of people, and it is very rare for me to see anybody outside of this pattern. And more specifically, these attitudes are over the self and others. And what I mean by that is how you believe you handle or your opinions regarding each aspect, and then how you believe others should, do, or could handle the aspects, or alternatively their opinions about the aspects. Now, when we dig in more to positive and negative, positive can be giving attention towards, organizing your life around that specific attitude, or the conventional definition of positive, just happy, uplifting, generally well-meaning, and comfortable with that aspect. And negative is converse. It's about ignoring, feeling insecure, feeling oblivious to it, or not caring about it, or just general negative feelings when that comes up, or negative opinions. Anything across the negative spectrum of attitude. So it's quite vague, and what this hints at is our disposition. And I'm going to say that word a lot during this. And our disposition is paramount in AP. And that is what separates it at a base level from MBTI, Enneagram, Socionics. Big Five is a little bit more relative. And really any other system you can think of. So we're going to go into this type VLFE just to have a good reference of how the attitudes work, and break it down at a more theoretical level. So as I said before, you have a self attitude and an others attitude. And for both, we have two aspects, that are positive, and two that we have a negative view towards. So for the VLFE specifically, they have a positive attitude for volition and logic, and a negative attitude over the self for physics and emotion. So you can see this in the type. They're very energetic. They love to explain things. They're detail-oriented. They trust their own logic and theories. They trust their ability to get things done. They know who they are. They understand their own character. These are all things related to volition and logic. But then you see the flip side. They are negative about their appearance. They're unsure of the best way to take care of their health. This is physics related. They don't pay much attention to their emotions unless they have to. They're very, they downplay their own emotions. They downplay how they feel about people. They don't pay much attention to their relationships and also their health. And they have a lacking disposition for both. Now, once we add the self attitude with the others attitude, this is when you get the full picture of somebody's type. So the others attitude, as you notice here, emotions and volitions switch spots. And this is a pattern that I've noticed in every person. It is extremely rare for somebody to break this pattern when you start with nothing and just look at somebody's personality and an outside perspective. So what this means is emotions is all of a sudden others positive, and volition is others negative. Now, logic and physics stayed the same. They're still negative towards others and positive towards others for logic. And that's because these two aspects, which are now attitudes because we've paired them with a disposition, which is positive or negative, these are process attitudes. So they are processing the information between the self and others because it's the same. They look at their own attitude and your attitude as the same. Your aspect as the same. Now, for the emotions and the volition, they switched. So emotions is positive for others, but the VLFE is negative for themselves. So they'll often take the information and the opinion of other people's emotions serious, but their own not so much. So they generally incorporate information quickly. Now, volition went negative. So they do care about their own character and how they believe they should act, their goals, their responsibilities, all these things that make up willpower and volition. But they don't really care about other people's opinions, so they'll ignore other people's, advice about their character. So both of these attitudes, E and V, are results-oriented. They're one-way traffic. They're not like the L and F in the middle here, which are more process. So how this looks broken down is like so. Your VLFE, positive, negative for the first. Logic is both positive and positive. Physics is negative and negative. Well, that's a very interesting one. And then emotions is negative and positive. So let's break these down one by one. So we've got confident volition. We call this the confident attitude. So what does this mean? This means the 1V type, which is the VLFE is, they are assured of who they are, their character, what they want to do, their obligations and responsibilities. They're going to make their own plans. They really believe their energy. They know where their energy is at and they know how to use it. And they don't really care what you think. They're not gonna attend to your responsibilities and your obligations and your energy. They're gonna focus on their own. That takes us to logic, which is their second attitude, and it's flexible. It's the self attitude is positive, and the others is positive. So they really try to help people understand things. They want to know what your theories are, and then they'll give their theories as well. And they generally have a lax attitude towards logic because it's positive. They see it everywhere they go. So when you look at this type, you might actually see logic first. And that's where people, we'll get to this in a later video, obviously, but that's where people can tend to mistype others, is because they see that flexible attitude first, and they think, oh, they're a 1L or they're a 1V, whatever it is. But really it's their second. So that's a quick little note there about how to type people. Now the third is physics for VLFE, and we call that the insecure attitude. It's negative and negative. Now, you would think, well, why isn't this the fourth? It's double negative. It should be the least, important. Well, the reason that that's not true is because it matches between the self and others. So information that is exchanged, becomes important. It nags at you. It makes you feel insecure. It makes you feel like something's wrong. It makes you worry about how you come across to other people because you're looking at that information that goes back and forth constantly. You can't really control that. That's just your disposition. It's double negative. So how this looks for physics, they worry about how they feel in a body level, at a sensing level. They worry about how they look, their practical skills. Are they doing enough for their health? Are they doing enough to live longer? Do they need to go to the doctor? Is the food they're eating okay? Is it correct? Is their diet good? How can their aesthetics be better? What do they need to preserve themselves and make sure that they're going to be all right physically? And, they'll run into a lot of worries about, their body possibly degenerating, like maybe their eyesight, or, if something's wrong with an extremity, maybe they'll worry about it and want to go to the doctor. So, this negative attitude can plague them, and that's why we call this the insecure attitude. So when we put the emotions into the fourth slot here, we call this unconcerned, and it's unconcerned emotion for them. And it's self-negative, others positive. So the fourth attitude, we say that the priority is low, but that doesn't mean that you're unskilled in this attitude. And I want to make that very, very clear for people who are new to this system. Because a lot of people will come in and they'll say, oh, you know what? I'm not a 4L type. I'm not unconcerned logic. Because they think, well, I'm interested in these systems. I'm interested in personality theory. Why would I be 4L? And that's where we have to really squash that insinuation early. Because you can be unconcerned, the unconcerned attitude, but still an intelligent person. Or you can even still be an emotional person as a 4E. But the thing is, you're going to look for outside source for the information regarding that. Because you don't take your own seriously. Anything that originates from within, you're going to kind of shove that down and you're going to look outside. You kind of have your binoculars looking around to see, what's the best here? And you can kind of be a connoisseur of that attitude. So a lot of and I'm going to harp on 4L because people mistype all the time that are 4L and they think their L is higher. I shouldn't say higher, they think their L is in another position when it's not. So, a 4L type might have a wonderful understanding of systems because they've looked at so many other people's explanations and they understand what's best. They start to develop a connoisseur relationship with other people's emotions. Or, logic in this case. So we have to look at this as a sponge. A sponge does not generate its own water. It soaks it up from outside. And then once it's full, it might wring it out so it can get some other water or other information in this sense and move forward. So I just wanted to throw that in there. This does not make you weak or underdeveloped or anything like that. It's just going to be a low priority for yourself. You're going to look for others. Okay. Hopefully that's clear. So all in all, we can move any of the aspects to any position, but no two aspects can be in the same position. You can't have a double attitude in logic. You can't have a double attitude in volition. This just doesn't happen. And I'm going to reiterate this a lot because I know people really want to, dig in and figure out how it works, and they're going to get confused of how their actual attitude is. This happens in every system. But over thousands and thousands of interviews and questionnaires and gathering all this information, I really have never seen it unless somebody is very unaware of how they are or they're giving me the wrong information. But this rarely happens. Most people, are pretty honest when it comes to that. And always the attitudes fall in different categories. The aspects fall in different categories. So as you can see here, this creates 24 types. It's a 4 factorial. 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. And what you get is 24 types. So these are, if you want to go ahead and pause and check out every type here, they're in alphabetical order, and just figure out what each looks like. Go ahead and see how that is. And links to my website in the description if you want to check those out now. So let's get into how AP is different from Jungian typology, and here we'll look at Myers-Briggs and what they have to say on their website. The purpose of MBTI personality inventory is to make the theory of psychological types described by Jung understandable and useful in people's lives. The essence of the theory is that much seemingly random variation in behavior is actually quite orderly and consistent. Notice how they say behavior. Now, we do go over behavior in AP, but it's more relevant in MBTI here. Being due to basic differences in the ways individuals prefer to use their perception and judgment. So we're already making a distinction here between AP and Myers-Briggs. Now, AP is neither perception nor judgment. It's positive and negative attitude, which is a different slice of reality than MBTI. It's completely different. And it's not a preference. It's either positive or negative. There is no preference. You don't prefer to use your first attitude over your second or your first over your third or anything. It's just when it comes to that, that's how it happens. Now, further down the road, maybe there will be maybe that will be incorporated into the theory, but as AP stands now, it has absolutely nothing to do with preferences between perception and judgment. Let's continue. Perception involves all the ways of becoming aware of things, people, happenings, or ideas. Judgment involves all the ways of coming to conclusions about what has been perceived. If people differ systematically in what they perceive and how they reach conclusions, then it is only reasonable for them to differ correspondingly in their interests, reactions, values, motivations, and skills. Now, I put the 8 cognitive functions here at the top because I wanted to talk about those as well. But Myers-Briggs is all about how you perceive the world and make decisions within it. And it measures your strengths within each cognitive function and how you naturally communicate that strength. So it's looking at your communication and your strengths and weaknesses. And this is all automatic. Now, AP is your own attitudes towards the 4 main realms of reality, and your attitudes towards other people. So this is just entirely different than MBTI. Even though we could make comparisons of the base of the system, we could say, F is kind of like sensing, which it is at a base level, but what we do with it is entirely different and explained differently. So, for instance, one might be a sensing type in MBTI, but they might be a 4F. They might not really care about how they personally sense the world, or they might downplay it. Now, maybe they perceive the world in a very elaborate way. Maybe they're an ISFJ and they really see the comforts of the world around them and how their body feels. They know it, but they just don't care. Their attitude is negative. So this is where you see the difference. We can also say this about maybe a feeling type in MBTI. Let's say like an ISFP or an INFP with FI dominant. But perhaps they're a 1L, where, they're very, very assured of the logic that they do have, or when they do feel logic, or not feel logic, but when they do entertain logical theories and learn new things and the knowledge that they've gathered. But there's still a feeling type in MBTI. They still have an elaborate understanding and elaborate judgments when it comes to FI, or if they're an FE type, ENFJ and ESFJ. So, we could also say that there's thinking types that are 1E or 2E. Regardless, attitude and strength and cognition and judgment and perception, totally different. And we see this as well. There is no meaningful correlation between MBTI and attitudinal psyche. And this has been studied for about 5 years now by me and many others. So hopefully we don't have this tendency to want to mash systems together because they're very, very different. So Jung uses the word attitude himself, but what Jung is referring to is like extroversion and introversion as separate attitudes. He's just using attitudes as a differentiation measure. Now, we also use attitudes as a differentiation measure, but we use it to say positive and negative, and whether we hold those towards an object or how we say aspect. So I know people are going to ask about that. Now, he's not defining whether you have a positive or negative attitude within extroversion and introversion. He's saying which one are you drawn towards. Now, one could say, well, positive, if you're an extrovert, then you have positive extroversion, but it's inherent and automatic, where an attitude in AP is about your disposition. So you do that. It's something that you have, it's apparent, and you create it on your own. And you use it to create and behave as well. So that's where behavior can come in. So let's move on and let's look at Enneagram. How about... So, Enneagram is Enneagram is interesting because there is a pretty clear correlation with AP. However, they're still measuring entirely different things. So Enneagram, this is from Catherine Farr's website. Enneagram is a circle enclosing 9 equidistant points connected by 9 intersecting lines. The symbol has its roots in ancient spiritual traditions in the Middle East. So yeah, that's just what it is mathematically. As we know it today, the Enneagram is a vital link between the psyche and the spirit. Now we see the word psyche there, which is interesting, and spirit, which is what we would call volition and AP. It is a conceptual system, a theory of personality types that is complex and sophisticated, and yet is a sensible and easily understood tool for self-discovery. The 9 points represent the ways in which the 9 different personality types perceive and defend their realities. So we're bringing a new word into here, defend. Defend implies that there's something of value that each type is trying to, well, defend. So the types are distinguished by unconscious motivations and preoccupations. That is another key word, worries, which produce patterns of perception, feeling, and behavior. So as we can see here, perception actually comes afterwards. This is where Enneagram is different from MBTI. Perception's automatic. Judgments are automatic in MBTI. Perception, as defined by Enneagram, is emergent from these unconscious motivations and worries. Okay, so this is where it's entirely different from MBTI. And this is also where it's different from AP. Feelings and behavior which can be gifts or obstacles to the personality. So Enneagram is like a culmination of our basic fears, basic desires, and how these concepts come together to create the ego fixation and the core motivations, and how those further develop to include your feeling, behavior, perceptions, etc., and your gifts, obstacles. So Enneagram is each center here, 1 through 9, has this core fear. This core worry, and it's unconscious. You don't even know that it's there. And then you develop these ways to deal with each of those worries, each of those fears. So how this kind of relates to AP is that the ways in which you can deal with your core fears can be correlated to the attitudes. Now, in the research, I found that each Enneagram type kind of has a few, like maybe 3 to 5 AP types that they kind of gravitate towards. Now, it's not a perfect science here. It's not like, okay, if you're an Enneagram 5, you're going to be FVEL always. Or you can't be EVFL if you're a 5. No, I haven't seen that. But what I have seen is people who maybe are VLFEs, for instance, the type that we've gone over in this, they're often 8s. They're often Enneagram 8. They often are Enneagram 7. They're often Enneagram 5. And sometimes they're Enneagram 3. So, I mean, that's 4 types, but it's very, very consistent. Now, there are exceptions. There are 1s. There are 2s. But the mass majority of VLFEs are these certain types. And I think it's because the core fear, the Enneagram core fear, lends itself to these specific attitudes. They work well together, and they kind of cover the same realms of reality here. Because you have these feelings towards certain areas of life, so you'll see that. Kind of like the instrument that the motivations are organized through, and how we can look at the motivations and see how they develop over these 4 realms, V, L, F, and E. So there will be more videos coming with specifically dedicated to the Enneagram and the correlations between them, and also the differences, because I think those are important as well. And that video will be coming in the future, so please look for that. So, all in all, AP really stands on its own as a theory, and the core tenets are quite unique, and these are all based off of a Russian system called psychosophy that was developed by Alexander Afanasyev. And he released his book called Syntax of Love in 1990, and then he actually died in the early 2000s, unfortunately, so he's not around anymore. But this base system that he created of these 24 types and the attitudes has really been evolved by myself and a lot of other typologists in Russia. And more patterns keep emerging the more all of us, experts dig in to this system. So I am more than honored to bring the system to the English-speaking world and develop it as best as I can in the future. So I greatly appreciate everybody who watched this video, and please stay tuned. This is going to be an ongoing series, and visit my website at attitudinalpsyche.com if you have any more questions. Feel free to leave a comment in the comments below. All right, thank you.